Okay. Okay, let's see. I'm curious, how's the audio? Okay, I think this should be good. All right, so this is my first stream in a while, being inspired by my younger siblings here for streaming. So although they might play games, I figured I want to take some time to practice programming and maybe also give an opportunity to teach others how to program and specifically how to solve programming problems. So if you're getting into computer science and you're trying to find a job in programming, a lot of times you might be challenged with these logic puzzles on how to use a program to solve them. So my goal with these streams, whenever I do stream, is to just try to teach you guys something. So these streams, whenever they happen, will be very chill. Thank you, Pocket Honey, for joining. I won't use real names unless you want me to. But let me know how the audio is, please. So today is mostly just to kind of get the stream set up, make sure I can get this audio working okay. And then also to work through an easy problem and then a slightly more difficult programming problem. So please feel free to share with your friends, and without further ado, I can get started. Oh, good, good. Yeah, I do have some like background lo-fi going. Hopefully it's just faint, but if you think it's too quiet, let me know. Hopefully it helps to fill the gaps wherever I'm not really chatting too much. And thank you, Moving Wheat, for the follow. So, if there's anything you want to see in particular, let me know. But I'm just going to go through, again, a couple of problems and see where it goes. So, there's a few websites that you can go to find problems. One website is called LeetCode. It's the one that I'll be using for these streams. And there's another site called HackerRank. And okay, thank you. I'll turn down the music just a bit. Okay, there, it's barely in the yellow now, so it's just mostly green, so hopefully that's better. Yeah, so we have LeetCode, and then there's HackerRank. A lot of these problems are very similar between sites. I don't really have a preference. I just been using LeetCode for a little while, so I figured I can stick with that. So, let me see, actually. I am trying some things out, so bear with me. So I'm trying to get things set up here. So now if we do agenda, maybe it'll pop up. Oh no, I need to add. Let's try this again. There we go. Yeah, I was just trying to set up a bot. So now we can see that these are the two problems that I'm going to be checking out today. If you want to try to do them yourself, please feel free, and I would encourage you. Otherwise, I'm going to do a walkthrough of both of them. So welcome, Matt. Your real name's in your username, so I'll just say Matt. No, I won't hack the government. That's not today. That's maybe in a future stream. So this problem, I guess first I'll start out. The language that I'll be using is TypeScript. It's actually, I'm gonna turn this down just a little bit more. It's based off of JavaScript, and the main difference between JavaScript and TypeScript is it has type annotations. For those who are new to programming, don't worry about what are type annotations, but mostly it's just a way to say like, oh, I expect a response of numbers, but we'll get into that in a bit. So for this problem, 1929 from LeetCode. It is titled Concatenation of Array. I don't plan on going into very specifics about like the basics of programming. If there's a desire for this, let me know. But otherwise, I'm just going to kind of walk through the problem as I would solve it if I were presented with this, like in a job interview, and go from there. So this problem starts out with given an array of numbers of length n. So already I'm debating about how to do this, but I'm going to flip between this screen, which is the problem, and then this screen, which is my blackboard that I'll be kind of talking from as I work on this problem. So as I digest this problem, I guess I'll read through it once and then digest it. So given an integer array called nums of length n, we want to create a new array called ans, short for answer, of length 2n, so 2 times n, where the item at position I in that array is the same as position I in the input array that was given, this integer array nums. And whenever we're at I plus n, we want that to also equal the input at I. And this is for 0 through I less than n, so it's a 0 index array. Now, when it comes to these problems, a lot of times they're just like, to me, like gobbledygook of words. And it can be a bit hard to decipher at times. So that's why I figured I can take a little bit of time to walk through how would we parse this as humans, you know, instead of just like some programming monster. So given an integer array nums, so yeah, I'm going to go to this board of sorts, this blackboard. And what we know is that we have something called nums, okay? And nums is an array. So that means we have some list of numbers. And it said it's an integer array. So in this integer array, we could have any numbers that are integers. So as an example, we could have 3, and actually let me erase the example and just use the first one. So the first one, they have 1, 2, 1 as the example. So let me reuse that. So we have this list of numbers, 1, 2, and 1. So this is our array. And when it comes to arrays, they are indexed. So for this list or this array, the first element in the array has an index of 0. And then the second one has an index of 1. And the last one has an index of 2. So for this array, switch back to right. For this array, n, which is the length, it equals 3. And notice that the last index is n minus 1. So this is always true whenever we have zero indexed zero indexed arrays. So we just deciphered this first portion. So now we can continue. We want to create a new array called ans, okay, where the length is of 2 times n. So let me work out this. So we have this new array called ans for answer. This new array has more items in it, more elements, and its length is 2n, which is going to be 6. So there's going to be 6 elements in this. So we can label the indexes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. because as I mentioned before, the last index of an array is always its length minus 1. So I'm going to go ahead and add commas for where we will have different elements. So now let's go back and say, okay, so wherever sorry, let me repeat this. So we have this array where if given a position I, we want it to equal the same position I, the value of position I of the input array. So let me just parse that right now. So I, and it says for I 0 less than equal to, for 0 less than or equal to I less than n. So here, so if we have an I of 0, it will go into this one. So the value at 0 is 1. So this element in the array is 1. At I equals 1, the value is 2, and it will go here where I is also equal to 1. So this is 2. And then we repeat it the same for the last element, which is I equals 2, the value is 1. So for our answers array, where I equals 2, the value is 1. So that completes the first, I'll just call it a loop. And then the second portion, or I guess condition, I shouldn't say loop, condition, is we have I plus n is equal to nums I. So we know what n is. N is 3 for this example. So we want to iterate through I from 0 to 2 again. But this time we want to add 3 to I to get new positions. Oops, did not mean to do that. So if we take I equals 0, plus 3 will give us the index 3. And at index 3, I was 0, so the value is 1. And if we repeat I plus, so if I equals 1, plus 3 is 4. So we're looking at index 4 of our answers array. The value is 2. And then we can repeat with 2. I plus, say I equals 2, plus a 3 is 5. So we're looking at answers 5 in our array. And then the value is 1. So this is the answer array that we should expect. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. If we flip back to the problem, the example 1 shows 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1 for the answers. So we just walked through how to come up, at least how to just walk through this problem. Please, if you have any questions, just, ask away, because I'll be watching chat, but I just will continue to go through this. Excuse me. And if you'd like to see anything specific, again, let me know. So now that we've walked through this problem by hand, using a blackboard of sorts, now we can go through and implement this in code. So what we did when we looked at this is, first, you notice that we created this new array called ants, short for answer. So I'm going to do the same thing. So I am going to create a new array, and it's going to be empty. There's nothing inside of it right now. And this is just how you create a blank array inside of TypeScript, JavaScript. Now, the next thing I want to do is start to iterate through our existing array. So, or sorry, our input array. So I'm going to create a new variable called n based on the problem. And I'm going to say n is equal to our array, specifically the length of the array. If you have any questions about JavaScript syntax or anything like that, let me know. But otherwise, I'm just going to kind of keep walking through things and using English, hopefully, to better describe what we see here. So now that we have this n, what we can do is loop through the array. And this is what we did before when we were walking through it on the blackboard. So we can say we want to do a for loop, and we're going to use this variable called I. It's going to start out with 0. And we want to keep increasing it, but we want to stop before I gets bigger than n or equal to n. So this is the syntax for that for loop. So we want to start I equal to 0, and we want to continue this loop while it's less than n. And whenever we're done with all the code inside of this loop, we want to go back and restart it and add 1 to I. So now what we can do is we can say, okay, oh, thank you for the follow, Matt. So now we can start to build out this array, this answer array. So what we want to do is say, for our answer at I, let's go ahead and set that equal to nums I. Whoops. And let's go ahead and whenever we're done, we want to return this new array. So let's return it. Whenever you're programming anything, I highly encourage to always keep running it and seeing, as you make changes to the program, how is it affecting your output or just whatever you're working with. So I'm going to run code, and when I run code, it's going to run through at least one of these example cases. Okay, so here we see the input was 1, 2, 1, and then the output is 1, 2, 1. And that's because if we go back to the problem, the blackboard, what we've done is essentially only this part of the algorithm. We've only iterated through this input array once. So as of right now, the program is doing exactly what we're telling it to, and it matches with what we're expecting. So now what we can do is we could go through this for loop again. And we can say for let I equal 0, I less than n, I plus plus, which means we're going to iterate by 1 each time. We want the answer at I plus n to equal the value, the input array at I. And now if we run the code, we should see that it works. And this is just following the same logic that we did on the blackboard, except for writing it inside of code. And if we were to submit it, so this is submitting it as a solution, and in LeetCode, it will run through a bunch of different scenarios or just examples to see how it works. So it successfully ran through a bunch of different test cases, and in the end, it was only faster than 17% of other submissions. And then in terms of memory usage, it was only less than 5%. So it uses a decent amount of memory, and it's not very fast, this current algorithm. And the reason for this is because we are instantiating this new array, and then we're going through and manually figuring out this logic. But that's where what we can do is take a little bit of time to optimize. How could we make this code better, more readable, what have you? So to me, writing an algorithm isn't too bad. Like if you can figure out as a person how you would execute on this thing, on the blackboard and doing it step by step, you can normally come up with some kind of solution. But here, what we're going to try to do next is let's try to optimize. And so for this, typically you need to look at the problem again and find maybe more abstract concepts for it and figure out what are some other patterns that I can recognize that might lead to a more efficient solution. So as I look at this, I'm noticing pretty much the biggest pattern is that our answer array is the input array repeated. So with this knowledge, maybe what we can do is instead of manually creating this new array, maybe we can just take our original input array and find a way to duplicate it. So I am going to copy this code, paste it, and then comment out the first one. All right. So now if I just run this just to make sure everything is running normal. So now let's try to come up with a better solution. So in JavaScript and a bunch of programming languages, this idea of combining arrays is very common. And it's included in pretty much all the programming languages, a functionality to combine arrays. So actually, let me go back to the board for a second. So this idea of combining arrays comes from the idea of, say we have one array, and I'll just use the example. So we have this first array, 1, 2, 1, and then we have this second array. I'll use a different color. But it is, whoops. sorry. But this is of the same color, or sorry, same value of the array. And what we would want to do is combine them or concatenate them so that they become just one single array. So this is called concatenation, but a lot of times when doing this, you can think of it as addition. So, oops, sorry about that. So just like with standard numbers, if I have 3 and I have the number 4 and I want to combine them, to make 7, a lot of time what we do is we use the math operator addition or plus. And so because this functionality is quite common for combining numbers, when it comes to arrays, we want to combine them together. And so a lot of times in programming languages, they will use the math operator addition or plus in order to perform the combination or concatenation of the array. So what we can do is say our answer, I'm going to delete pretty much all of this. So we want is our answer to be the original array plus a copy of that input or original array. So now if we run our code, and I made a mistake. So some languages support it, others don't. So here we see that the TypeScript compiler is yelling at me saying, hey, don't add these two arrays. That's not the proper way to do it. So that's where I will do a quick search, because I know that JavaScript, TypeScript supports concatenation for arrays, but sometimes I don't remember what the syntax is for actually rewriting it. So let's go ahead and bring this into the picture. So here we have the MDN, which is the Mozilla Developer Network, I think, web docs. So if you're learning JavaScript for the first time, or not maybe the first time, but if you're learning JavaScript, this is a very, very good resource to have in order to search up, things about JavaScript and how the language works. Yes, how dare I make a mistake? My bad. So, so here we can see an example, I'll zoom in, of concatenating some arrays. So we have our first array here made up of ABC, the second array DEF, and then the third array is the concatenation or the combination of the two different arrays. So as an output, we will have ABCDEF. So we want to do the same thing here. So I can use this as a reference to say, okay, let me just copy this code here, because as programmers, it's very common to copy and paste code from the internet, but just be careful and understand what you're copying and pasting into your code. So here we have, instead of array 1, we want our input array, and we're just combining it with itself. So now we have our input nums, and we want to concatenate it with itself and save that into this new variable called answer. So now if we try to run this, we should have better results. And we do. And now if we submit it, we can see that now our code is 57% faster than others, and it uses less than 15% of other submissions. So in terms of memory. So we can see that we got quite the boost in terms of speed, and memory is still about the same. And the reason that memory is probably about the same is because we're still creating this answer array, but we could, now this, in terms of optimization, this is where I personally would stop. If you try to optimize things too much or make it as efficient as possible, a lot of times you might lead to confusion about what are we expecting the code to do. But for the sake of exercise, I will try to make this even more efficient. So let's copy and paste this. And now what can we do to make this more efficient? I would pause and ask the chat for responses, but I don't think Pocket Honey has been doing too much programming, and not sure about anyone else. So feel free to throw out suggestions, but otherwise I'll just keep going through it. So what we can do to make this more efficient is, instead of instantiating this array and then returning the array, what we can do is just return the output directly. And we can run this to make sure that it works. Okay, and we can submit this to see if it had any improvement on the memory. Okay, so memory-wise, it didn't really improve. For whatever reason, it even got slower. So there's going to be like a tolerance to like how fast these things run in memory. So, and I guess the memory usage doesn't exactly surprise me, because we still have to essentially instantiate this array no matter what. It's just, instead of assigning it to a variable, it is being put into this temporary variable that we don't even see, and then being returned. So this was the first problem. What did you guys think? Any comments, suggestions, follows even? And I keep like looking to the side because I have my chat window over here, so. Actually. Okay. All right. If no comments, then I'll go ahead and look at a second problem. This one might be more, it should be more difficult. There we go. I don't know why it does this sometimes. Excuse me. Let me get a drink here. Okay. So now for the second problem, it is LeetCode 1476. So feel free to try it out yourself if you'd like. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So this is a medium difficulty. And when you go for job interviews and the like, I feel like it's pretty common to use medium problems. In fact, for setting up the interview for the place where I work right now, I went through LeetCode and tried to find a medium problem to use. This one is probably going to be harder than one that I would request of people who are interviewing, but to each their own. So, but if you are, studying computer science, you're approaching, the end. If you want to get into Google, Amazon, those big tech companies out of Silicon Valley. Although I'm not a big fan of it, I would recommend to practice these these medium problems for sure. Sometimes they might ask hard problems, but at least they're typically medium problems. So, and again, at any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to just ask them in chat. So, I picked this problem because it was one of the most accepted in terms of answers, but I see that it's very downvoted, so we'll see how bad it is. All right, so sub-rectangle queries. In forewarning, I didn't even look at these problems, at least this medium one, I barely looked at, so we'll see how bad it is. So we want to implement the class sub-rectangle queries, and here we have sub-rectangle queries, which receives a rows by columns rectangle as a matrix of integers in the constructor and supports two methods. One is update the rectangle, where we have row 1, column 1, row 2, column 2, in the value. So it updates all values with new value in the subrectangle whose upper left coordinates is R1 column 1 and the bottom right coordinate is row 2 column 2. Man, this is going to be definitely more challenging. And then get value. So given a row and column, returns the current value of the coordinate row column from the rectangle. Yeah, this is definitely a step up from the last problem, but hopefully it won't be too bad. So for this, we have some kind of input, and we're given this oh, interesting. So we have the input is like here is the input array or something like of that nature, and then get the value of this and then update this coordinate or this subrectangle, then get the value, get another value, update, get another value. Okay, this is strange, but let's not worry about that too much. So, man, again, whenever you're working on these kinds of problems, maybe not again, but just I would advocate to work it out on a whiteboard, blackboard, piece of paper, something, because if you just start programming a problem and you don't really know what you're programming, you're bound to get lost in the code. So let's go ahead and kind of digest this problem. Let me move that over here, and let's start a new layer. All right, so we have a class, and in programming, classes is just a way to organize related code. I'm not going to dive into how classes work or things of that nature. I don't think it's important for this problem, but it's just a way to encapsulate related code. So here we have something related to sub-rectangles and just rectangles in general, or really they're matrices. And we want to have functions that relate to this. So we want to be able to update it. We want to get values from it. So, sorry for flipping back and forth. So implement the class subRectangle queries, which receives a rows by columns rectangle as a matrix of integers in the constructor. So I'm going to stop there. So it receives a rows by columns rectangle as a matrix of integers in the constructor. So what does that mean? That means we are given some input, and this input is a matrix. So we have elements. It's like a list, but the difference is that this matrix is this input, it is two-dimensional. And I guess matrices could be one-dimensional, but so this matrix is two-dimensional. So we have rows of elements, and these rows of elements each will have a column. So let me flip back and try to look at its example. So for the example, we have 1, 2, 1, 4, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. So I'm going to write that out. So we have 1, 2, 1. Oh, geez. I don't want this. No, thank you. This is what happens when you use like a drawing app to just try to have a simple like whiteboard, blackboard type functionality. So hopefully my wrist doesn't like cause more things to go off. So 1, 2, 1, and then we have 4, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, and then 1, 1, 1. Okay. So this is our input in this example. So now for this, so we want to be able to store this into memory because we want to be able to act on it. So we know that our input is eventually going to be stored in this class, but we can actually worry about that for another time. And then the next thing is we want to be able to support two methods. One is update subRectangle. I'm going to save this one for later because it's more complex. And then the other is get value. So given a row and then given a column, return the value. So let's say I wanted to do get value of, I don't know, 2, 1. Assuming that we are using zero indexed arrays and columns and everything, what that means is we want the row to be 2 and the column to be 1. So actually, yeah. So here we have the rows. So this is row 0, row 1, row 2, and row 3. And then we have column 0, column 1, and then column 2. So if I have row 2, column 1, that means I want this value. So this should equal 2. So that's how we can think about the location of things. And the way that we can maybe walk through this a little bit in deeper, like trying to think of how would the algorithm work potentially for looking at this. Let's get the first example. The first example is 0, 2. So let me go ahead and erase what I previously had, if I can. Okay. Where's the eraser? There we go. So let's get back to our paintbrush or whatever. So we want 0, 2. Oh geez, this is not what I wanted. I think this is what I want. Yeah. Sorry. Learning the tools on the job, so to speak. So yeah, we're looking for 0, 2, and we expect the output to be 1 based on this example. So row 0. So we want to iterate through our matrix until we hit the row that we're desiring. So the index as we enter this is going to be 0. And so this matches the row that we want. So we enter into this row. And now we're going to be iterating through this array, you know, one-dimensional matrix, to figure out which one do we want. So we want index of 2. So here's index 0. That's not what we want. Index 2, or sorry, index 1, we do not want. And then index 2, this is the one that we want. So the value is 1. And this matches with what the expected output is of this problem. So we have an understanding of how the get value works. But now we have to think about how does the update subrectangle works. So essentially, I'll reread it. So update subrectangle updates all values with new value in the subrectangle whose upper left coordinate is row 1, column 1, and bottom right coordinate is row 2, column 2. So if we say we want to update, oh geez, that's very thick. So we want to update from, I don't know, excuse me, say from 2, 1, and I should have really, I'll make this a different color. Sorry. Say we want to update from 2, 1 to row 3, column 2. So we're looking to update this subrectangle. Then, and we want to replace the value to a 4. I don't know, I'm just making something up. Then we have to take a moment and think, how would this work as in like an algorithm? How could we algorithmically operate on this. So what we could do is we can go through each row and say, okay, what we would expect. Actually, first let's think about this like just a little bit more. We would expect this row 1, to be less than row 2, and those are those two values. And then also we expect column 1 to be less than column 2. So because we have this knowledge that row 1 is going to be less than row 2 input, column 1 is going to be less than column 2 input, like the coordinates, then we could start iterating through this at row 2, or sorry, at the start of the row 1 input, whatever that is. The R1 variable, I should be saying. R1 meaning the top left, or the top coordinate of this subrectangle. And also, side note, when it comes to interviewing, with these problems, it can be important to talk out the solution, because as you talk out these solutions, it gives an indication to the interviewers how well you can communicate more technical concepts. So like right now I am butchering this for sure, but as you keep practicing these problems, your ability to communicate technical concepts should come more easily. So going back to this, we can start our looping really from the top row that we want to start with a subrectangle. And we can say, okay, starting with this row and then stopping whenever we hit this final row, or like after it, then this is how we can bound it in terms of iteration of going through the different rows. And then when it comes to columns, we can take a similar approach. We know where it starts and we know where it ends, so we can, for each column between column 1 and column 2, or C1 and C2, we can iterate on those values. So this is very much like a for loop problem, because we want to iterate through a bounded context of sorts. So we know what our boundary is. And we want to say for every row in that boundary and for every column in that boundary, we want to replace the value. So hopefully that made sense. If it didn't make sense, let me know. I'm happy to try to talk through it more. But otherwise, maybe I find also like a lot of times, once you can envision the solution for the problem, then you can, it becomes almost easier to just talk about it, or sorry, program it rather than talking about it. So I'm going to go ahead and flip, and let's update, or let's work on get value. This is going to be the easier one. So for get value, what we want to do is we want to return the number at a specific coordinate. Well, with JavaScript, and this is true of most languages, when you have an array, we can access arrays, multi-dimensional arrays. So an array could have an array in it, much like this diagram, we have this big outer array. I'll highlight in yellow. So we have this big outer array, but then we have these smaller arrays inside of them. So what we can say is we want to return our rectangle, and we want to return, oops, that was weird, it kind of cut out. Oh, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. I guess my wife was calling for me and I didn't hear her, so that's maybe not the best. All right. Oh God, where was I now? Okay, oh yeah, we were getting a value. So, oh, come here, kitty. Hi, how are you? Okay. So, excuse me. So with this rectangle, with arrays in nested arrays, you could typically access them by the index. So we know what the coordinate is that we want to return. So we can just pass that into the array via its subscripts and say return the row column. Now, I do need a cat cam. I probably could set one up, but when the cat's not there, you wouldn't be looking at anything too great. So, so we're trying to access this rectangle, but you'll notice like this rectangle was never instantiated, I guess. So what we can do is say when the constructor runs for this class, we want this rectangle to equal rectangle, whatever's passed in, and without any adjustments. So now at least this portion should work. We could try to run code and see based on this example do we get values for what we expect. And as I mentioned, running code early and often is good because then we can see if there's any problems. So it says property rectangle does not exist on type subrectangle queries. This is something specific to TypeScript where it expects us to specify what type everything is. So here we're specifying that this class, subrectangle queries, has a property called rectangle. Go ahead and run, see if any more compiler errors show up. All right, so no more compiler errors showed up. And at least the first output of get value is correct. So we can feel confident that get value is working properly. We notice that after it runs update subrectangle, the values are different and we can't see those yet. So let's go ahead and try to figure out the code for subrectangle. So we want to update values in place. And this is good to know because we aren't trying to take this complex object and manipulate it and return a new copy of it. That would make things more complicated. But since we're just trying to go into this matrix as shown and change, say, all of these 2s and 1s into just 4s over and over again. That looked more like a 9, but kitty cat's trying to bite me. Nope. Then again, just modifying these values directly is a little bit easier of a problem to solve. In practice, always be careful of modifying objects like we are doing right now, because it might lead to more buggy code in the future. But this is the problem, so we're just going to follow the problem as it is prescribed. So I mentioned earlier that we want to be able to iterate through the rectangle. So I'm going to write the start of a for loop. And a lot of times in programming, we'll use I to represent the index of an array. So we want it to start with row 1. And then we want to stop before I gets bigger than row 2 plus 1. So if we go back to here, we want to iterate through, let me find a different color. We want to iterate through row 2 and end on row 3. So if we go through this again, if we could say I equals to 2 for this one, then I equals 3 for this, and then we want to stop when I equals 4. So that's what this will do, this code right here. So row 2 would be 3, and then plus 1 is 4. So that's where we stop. And after each iteration, we just increment it by 1. Now, so we have the iterations through rows. Now we want to iterate through, through the columns. So we'll use a different variable. We'll just call it j. This is common. We use i's and j's because it's common in mathematics when you're talking about multi-variable systems to use I and j for coordinates and things of that nature. We could use x's and y's, it's just letter soup for trying to describe how we're iterating through these arrays or matrices. So for J, we want to start it at column 1, and we want to keep iterating until J is the same size as column 2 plus 1, or the same value as column 2 plus 1. And we just want to keep incrementing J by 1 for each time. And the logic is the same as the rows for the columns, so that's why the code looks so similar. So now what we have is code that allows us to iterate through each row and column. So now all we have to do is set them all to the same value, this new value. So we can say this rectangle at the coordinate I, j, we want to set it to the new value. And that's it. Because as the description reads, and it's always important to go back to the problem to make sure you really understood it. So for update subrectangle, update all values with the new value in the subrectangle whose upper left coordinate is row 1, column 1, and bottom right coordinate is row 2, column 2. So we can run this and see if it works. And it does. So congrats to us. And let's see if it runs against a wider gamut of test cases. So we're submitting it. And the difference for LeetCode and a lot of these types of site, run code just gives you running through one example, whereas submit will run you through all of the different tests. So we have our code. It runs 30% faster than others, and memory usage is still in the lower percentile. Oh, 1 second. All right. Sorry about that. So, where was I? Oh yeah. So yeah, this is our solution. And when we look at the solution, we can think about, are there ways to optimize this? There probably is. The process of going through each element and replacing it with a new value. I feel like there's a better way to do it. Like JavaScript arrays has this functionality called, I think it's called fill. Where it will automatically kind of fill an array, at least a one-dimensional array, with a bunch of values, like a given value. So if we wanted to try to make this a little bit different, we could remove this for loop here, and I'll comment it out to demonstrate it. And we can say we want to iterate through each row, but then once we hit that row, instead of iterating through each column, let's do this rectangle at I, and we want to fill with our new value, and we want to fill it from position blank to position blank. So we want to fill it from column 1 to column 2 plus 1. Let's go ahead and run this and see if it still works as expected. It does, and we can submit it to see if there's any improvements, performance improvements. No, so it actually didn't perform any better. So, and that's where, you know, if you're looking for getting the most value out of your code, you would have to experiment with these kinds of things in order to identify what is the best solution for your need. But I think this will be it for today. Thank you for everyone who's joined. If you want to see more content like this, please feel free to follow. If you want to see other content, please just let me know via the chat or however. I did put my Twitter. It's the same username as my Twitch. I don't really use it that much. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you, everyone. And maybe sometime in the future, after doing these programming practice problems, I might do more other stuff. Like I've thought about doing like open source contributions and streaming those, because I've done some in the past. And then also I've thought about doing like trying to develop maybe products or apps or things like that, but I don't have any good ideas. So I'm kind of holding off on that one. But yeah, so thank you, and talk to you guys later.